Hi, I'm Saren Vale. The day his mother slid the prenup across the table, she smiled and said, "Just making sure you leave with nothing." And he, my fiancé, just sat there, silent. They thought I was desperate, disposable, a placeholder until the real legacy arrived. But they had no idea. I came from silence. I just didn't stay there. When I inherited $29 million, their faces told me everything. You ever wonder what happens when the woman they tried to erase becomes the one rewriting the story? But before we dive in, tell me, where are you listening from right now? And have you ever been told to know your place just before you turn the table? It was a Wednesday afternoon when the envelope arrived. Thick, cream-colored stationery, the kind you don't just send for dinner. The return address was embossed in gold foil, Blaine Hill. No first names, no warmth. Just their surname, like it carried the weight of old money and older judgment. I stared at it on the kitchen counter, sipping lukewarm coffee and listening to the hum of my ceiling fan in San Antonio. I already knew what it was, an invitation, when I finally opened it. The wording read like a proclamation from the last century. You are cordially invited to an evening of formal celebration at the Blaine estate to honor the union of our son, Callan Dorn Blaine, and Miss Saren Vale Fay. Not my engagement. Our sons. The difference didn't escape me. Callan Dorn called an hour later, just as I was stepping out of a client call. His voice was cheerful. Too cheerful. Rehearsed. "Did you get the invite, babe?" "Got it," I said, still holding the card. "Very royal of them." He laughed a little nervously. "It's tradition. Just one night. My parents want to make a good impression." I didn't say it out loud, but I already knew. Blaine family traditions weren't about impressions. They were about decisions. The next evening, spring rain left a damp sheen across the driveway as I stepped out of the car. The Blaine estate looks like something out of a luxury real estate catalog. Spotless hedges, a driveway wide enough for motorcades, and too much glass to feel like home. It felt more like a showroom, cold, controlled. A valet took my keys without a word. At the door, a woman in navy silk greeted me. She smelled of roses and rubbed me the wrong way instantly. "Miss Fay," she said, barely glancing at me. "This way." Inside, everything gleamed. Marble floors, chilled air, family portraits too large to ignore. One of Callan Dorn as a child sat above the fireplace, bow tie, golden curls, already looking like someone who'd been told he mattered more than anyone else in the room. Dinner was held in a sunken dining hall, some architectural choice clearly meant to make everyone feel small. And I did, even in heels. Callan Dorn stood as I entered. He offered a brief smile, then gestured to the chair beside his. Like I was a guest he didn't quite know what to do with. I sat, tried to smile. Reginald Blaine, his father, nodded politely. Virel Dorn, his wife, my would-be mother-in-law, looked me over like I was an item under auction lighting. "Saren Vale," she purred. "Welcome. We're so happy you could join us." I wanted to believe her. I really did. The conversation stayed on their terms: investments, legacy, donations, golf courses I'd never heard of. I tried to interject once, mentioning a community clinic my firm had helped restructure. Virel Dorn blinked slowly. "How quaint," she murmured, lifting her wine glass. Callan Dorn was unusually quiet, like a man trying not to breathe too loudly in his own house. Every time our eyes met, he gave me that apologetic half-smile, as if that counted for something. Dessert was lemon tarts, sweet, tart, and sharp, just like her. Then Virel Dorn stood. "I hope you all enjoyed the meal," she said, tapping her glass. "But before we raise a toast to family, we have one small tradition." I should have known something was coming. The room fell into that hush people get when they're in on a secret. She lifted a black velvet envelope from the sideboard and placed it in front of me. "We just ask that our new family members acknowledge a small formality," or she said, her lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I opened it slowly. A prenuptial agreement. 6 pages, printed on thick legal stock, All assets remain separate. No claims in the event of divorce. No stake in the family trust. No inheritance? Nothing. Callan Dorn didn't say a word, didn't reach for my hand, didn't shake his head. Just sat still, jaw tight. I was still processing when he slid something toward me. A gold pen, elegant, engraved, Callan Dorn and Saren Vale, always. He had given it to me when I walked in. Just a little something, he'd said, to mark the next chapter. I'd thought it was romantic. Now it sat beside a legal document meant to strip me of any safety. And that same pen was expected to sign me into silence. I looked at him again. Still nothing. Not even a whisper of protest. Varel Dorn leaned in slightly. "It's just a precaution, dear," she said, "in case things don't work out. We want to make sure you leave with nothing you didn't come with." That last sentence hit like a slap, dressed in silk and sugar, but still a slap. I sat there a long moment, letting silence bloom around me. The room waited, a few of them smirked. One of Callan Dorn's cousins sipped his brandy with a knowing look. Finally, I picked up the pen, turned it in my hand, then gently placed it back in its box. "I'm not sure what I walked into tonight," I said evenly, "but it doesn't feel like a welcome." I stood. No drama, no yelling, just quiet certainty. As I stepped back, I caught Varel Dorn's expression, calm, almost satisfied. She looked straight into my eyes and smiled like she had won. I didn't slam the door behind me, even though everything inside me begged for a loud ending. I simply walked out, heels clicking against marble floors that never felt like they'd welcome dirt or people like me. By the time I reached my car, the clouds had split open. A slow, steady drizzle painted streaks across the windshield. I sat there for a moment, engine off, hand still clutching the velvet box with that golden pen inside. It weighed more than it should have, not in ounces, but in everything it now meant. Drove slowly, like my mind needed the road to stretch. Rain traced the edges of the glass. The wipers ticked back and forth with a steady rhythm, but the silence inside the car was louder. I could still hear the way Varel Dorn said, "So you leave with nothing you didn't come with." Like I was some wandering guest they were, politely escorting off their ship before it set sail. But what gnawed at me wasn't just her voice. It was Callan Dorn's absence in that moment. The man who once pressed my hand under the table when he thought I was nervous during client meetings. Tonight, he looked straight ahead. Like my discomfort was just part of the decor. The neighborhood lights blurred as I turned onto my street. The Blaine estate faded behind me, but it didn't feel like I'd left. That house had followed me, clung to my coat, crawled into the spaces between my thoughts. When I pulled into my driveway, I left the engine running a moment longer. There was a calmness in the rain that made me hesitate. Like maybe, if I sat still enough, the world would click back into place. It didn't. Inside, I kicked off my shoes and dropped my clutch on the kitchen counter. The house smelled like lavender and old books. Familiar. Mine. I turned the lights on low, took a glass from the cabinet and poured water. I didn't drink it. My phone buzzed. I didn't even have to check the screen. I knew it was him. I let it go, 3 rings, 4, then quiet. 10 minutes passed, maybe 12. Then came the knock. I stayed still. Another knock. Firmer this time. I crossed the living room, paused with my hand on the handle, and opened it. Callan Dorn stood there, soaked through. No umbrella. Shirt clinging to him, collar curled, hair a mess. He looked small. Not like the man who once held me in silence when I got bad news. He looked like someone who'd let silence do his talking for him, and now regretted it. "I didn't know she was going to spring it on you like that," he said, voice low. "I didn't step aside. I didn't ask them. It was supposed to be a formality. Something legal. I told her not to do it like that. She didn't listen." I leaned my shoulder against the doorframe. "But you did nothing." He swallowed. Rain dripped from his eyelashes. I froze. I didn't want to embarrass anyone. I held his gaze. "You didn't want to embarrass your mother." He blinked. She's always been a lot." I exhaled through my nose. That's not the problem. What is then? The problem is when you aren't. I'm not her, he said quickly. Vale, come on. You know me. No, I said calmly. Tonight made me wonder if I ever really did. His mouth opened like he had more to say, but no words came. I didn't invite him to try harder. I didn't ask him in. I closed the door. Gently. The latch clicked. Only then did my legs start to tremble. I walked back to the kitchen, flicked on the overhead light, and stared at the pen on the counter. It glinted against the granite. Callan Dorn and Saren Vale. Always. Always what? I slid down against the cabinets, glass still in hand, knees drawn to my chest. The house around me was quiet, but inside was noise, deafening. That kind. Of hurt. The kind where someone doesn't choose you loudly, settles deep. I'd rather he screamed. At least then I'd know where he stood. I didn't cry right away. I tried to rationalize it. Told myself this is how wealthy families operate, that legal papers are part of their love language, that it wasn't personal, but it was. Because silence is personal. Silence says, I saw you drowning, and I watched. Somewhere around midnight, I stood, poured the water down the drain, and picked up my phone. I scrolled past his name, past the missed calls. I tapped on Mace Trant. She picked up on the second ring. You okay? She asked. I smiled softly. I'm better than okay. Pause. I need you to ready some papers, I said, my voice calm. Because tomorrow, I'm going to the Blaine estate. Another pause. And this time, I'm bringing my own pen. They welcomed me in with champagne smiles. I raised my glass and smiled right back. But this time, I didn't feel like a guest in their home. I walked through the same foyer, now noticing the small chip on the corner of the marble column, the slight unevenness in the tile beneath the entry rug. The place no longer felt untouchable. It was just a house, expensive, sure, imposing, of course, but not sacred. Callan Dorn approached first. His navy blazer was tailored, but the tension in his shoulders betrayed him. You look nice, he said, voice low. I nodded, keeping my coat on a moment longer. Thanks for having me again. Behind him, Varel Dorn stood, again in silk. But today her earrings sparkled like they had somewhere to be. We're so glad you could join us again, she said with that same syruped sweetness. I brought something too, I replied, setting my leather bag on the sideboard near the dining room. Her brows lifted slightly. How thoughtful. We moved toward the formal parlor, the same room from our last awkward lunch. Only this time I didn't shrink when Reginald held out my chair. I took my seat, slowly, with purpose. Lunch was artfully plated. Roasted duck, truffle risotto, sliced pears with cheese. The kind of food you serve someone you want to impress or distract. Conversation drifted toward politics, art auctions, and a cousin's engagement in Charleston. No one mentioned the last time we sat. Here. No one mentioned the clause, or the silence, or the file. I played along, letting my smile float where it needed to be. Nodding politely when Reginald remarked, "How measured you seem today." "Composure," he said with a grin, "is something we value in this family." Varel Dorn chimed in gently, her eyes locking onto mine for a moment too long. "You're learning how our family works, Saren Vale. I must say, it suits you." I set down my fork and reached for my water glass. "Thank you," I said, holding back the words that were waiting their turn. The plates were cleared. Champagne was poured. I noticed Varel Dorn watching Callan Dorn, then me, then Callan Dorn. Again, she expected something, but she didn't know what was coming. The butler offered to top off the glasses. I held up a hand. "Before we toast," I said, pushing back my chair just slightly, "I'd like to say something." Everyone turned. I reached into my leather bag and pulled out a simple navy folder. I set it on the table in front of Callan Dorn and Varel Dorn. "What's this?" Callan Dorn asked, glancing down without opening it. My prenup, I said quietly. A little family tradition, from my side. The room paused. Varel Dorn's fingers froze around her champagne flute. Excuse me? She asked. I leaned, and just enough to keep my tone conversational. It's pretty straightforward. Joint access to all future income, joint investment control, shared IP rights on any brand, media, or startup ventures we build during the marriage. I tapped the corner of the folder, and if it's signed first, it voids any previous clauses, including trust provisions initiated by outside parties. The silence rang like a bell. Reginald cleared his throat sharply. Is this a joke? No, I said, lifting my glass, but not drinking. I just figured since we're all so fond of contracts, we might as well enjoy matching ones. Callan Dorn stared at the folder like it was written in a foreign language. Varel Dorn's mouth opened, but no sound came. It's enforceable? Callan Dorn finally asked. I looked at him, letting every question I never asked rise just behind my eyes. It's signed, dated, witnessed. All we need now is yours. But, Varel Dorn cut in, her voice tight. Why now? I tilted my head gently. Because I've been told more than once that I should know what I'm walking into. And I do. I let the words linger. I just thought, maybe you should too. You can't seriously expect him to sign this, Reginald muttered. Oh, but I do, I said, setting my champagne down. And you'll need to sign today, or the engagement is off. Callan Dorn pushed his chair back, nearly knocking into the edge of the table. You're bluffing. I reached into my purse, slowly, and placed my father's gold pen beside. The folder. The one he used for every final contract. The one I hadn't touched in 5 months. I didn't say a word. Didn't need to. The pen gleamed under the chandelier's light like it had waited years for this moment. Reginald's eyes flicked between me and Callan Dorn, calculating every second that passed. I think we should consult legal, he said, turning slightly to the hallway. A moment later, one of their in-house attorneys appeared, Franklin Mayer, too much cologne. Always addressed me as Miss, even after the engagement was announced. What's going on? Franklin asked, his voice cautious. She wants a prenup, Reginald said. Callan Dorn scoffed. No, she's demanding I sign her prenup. I didn't. Rise to the bait. Just a small tradition from my side, I replied, locking eyes with Franklin. And before you ask, yes, it's been notarized, reviewed, and it supersedes any prior draft not mutually signed. Franklin turned to Reginald, waiting for direction, but Reginald didn't speak. Varel Dorn did. This is absurd, she snapped. You can't just show up and expect us to toss aside decades of planning because you had a good lawyer and a dramatic moment. I smiled. Actually, I can. She opened her mouth again, but I calmly reached into my bag, not rushed, not aggressive, and pulled out a second envelope. Cream-colored, thicker, wax-sealed. My father's crest still intact. I slid it across the table to Franklin. This was included in my father's estate documents, dated 8 months before the engagement. You'll find a notarized statement confirming my status as sole heir to all intellectual property under the FA Trust, including residual royalties from Blue Silo Holdings. I paused for effect as Franklin opened it and skimmed the clause. If I enter into a union with another legacy family, I said evenly, the FA holdings remain protected, unless the other party agrees to full asset transparency. Otherwise, the merger is null. Reginald stiffened. That includes media access, trademarks. I turned to Varel Dorn, my voice soft but clear. And the name. Her face paled. That includes your lifestyle magazine, by the way. The one you're trying to relaunch, using my name in the promotional campaign. She blinked rapidly, but didn't argue. Franklin unfolded a smaller piece of aged paper. He cleared his throat, hesitated, then read. If they ever try to reduce you, remind them what bloodline they're marrying into. I recognized the handwriting. My father's. He'd always said less with more. Callan Dorn sat frozen, mouth slightly ajar, like he couldn't decide whether to yell or disappear. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked. "This isn't fair." I turned to him, measured. "Neither was asking me to walk into your house, into your family with open arms, only to be handed a document meant to strip me bare." "All while you smiled and stayed silent." He dropped his gaze. Reginald sighed. Loud. "Callan Dorn, sign the damn paper." Varel Dorn jolted like she'd been slapped. "Reginald, you can't be serious." "I'm very serious," he snapped. "You wanted a Blaine alliance? Well, here it is. But not on your terms anymore." Callan Dorn stared at the pen like it might bite him. Then, with an almost imperceptible tremble, he picked it up, clicked it, and signed. I said nothing, just nodded once, then gently took the folder, folded it, placed it in my bag. I stood. "Thank you for your time." No applause, no words, just the sound of leather brushing against fabric as I pulled my coat over my shoulders and walked toward the door. Franklin opened it for me. Oddly respectful now. Maybe he saw something they didn't. The wind outside bit at my cheeks, late autumn, sharp and honest. My car was parked at the bottom of the estate. Drive, just past the fountain Callan Dorn once joked about renovating in my name. I reached it in measured steps, not hurried. I wasn't running, I wasn't escaping. Inside the car, I closed the door gently behind me. The silence was a comfort I hadn't known I missed. I rested both hands on the steering wheel and just sat there. Then it came. Not loud sobs, not the unraveling kind of grief, just quiet tears, warm, steady, human, because not everything broken deserves fixing, but sometimes it deserves being seen, and I had been seen. Finally, not for their convenience, not for what I could offer, but for the weight of who I was, on my own. I reached for my phone. 2 missed calls from Mice. 1 voicemail. I pressed play. Her voice was low, breathless, urgent. "Are you sitting down? You're going to want to hear what Lucy just leaked." Pulled the car door closed gently, leaned back in my seat, and let the quiet settle. For a few long seconds, the only sound was the soft purr of the engine. My hands were still on the steering wheel, but they weren't gripping anymore. The Blaine estate gate loomed behind me in the rearview mirror. It already felt far away. Then came the vibration. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out my phone. 1 new voicemail. From Mace. I tapped play. "Saren Vale, it's Mace. Are you sitting down?" Lucy leaked the internal proposal, the one they presented to their board 6 months ago. Subject line reads, "Marital merger strategy, Q4 positioning," and "Saren Vale, your photos on slide 3. My breath hitched. Then I exhaled. Slowly. Deliberately. Like I was setting down a weight I didn't realize I'd been carrying. Didn't cry. Didn't throw the phone across the dash like someone in a movie would. Instead, I just whispered to no one. Of course they did. Still in the car, I opened the file Mace had sent. My thumb scrolled, slide after slide. Charts, projected brand improvement metrics, press release drafts, and there, bold and centered. Utilize strategic engagement with Saren Vale Fay, PhD candidate. Underdog narrative, strong minority optics, positioning for media redemption arc, they. Had written me like a marketing plan. I wasn't a fiancé. I was a tool, a diversity angle, a photo op, a rebrand. I let my head fall back against the seat. The car ceiling looked the same as it always had, but suddenly it felt too small, like even the air had been in on the game. I laughed. Just once. Short. Sharp. It bounced off the windshield and vanished. They thought I was a narrative, I said aloud, my voice steady. I'm a chapter they don't get to write. It took me a while to start the car. Maybe 10 minutes, maybe 20. I don't know. But eventually I drove. Not home. Not yet. To the small cafe Mace mentioned Lucy liked, tucked between a dry cleaner and a florist. The kind of place people forget exists until they need somewhere private to break. Lucy was already seated at the back table, arms wrapped tightly around her tablet, like she expected someone to snatch it. She looked up and offered a weak smile. Hi, Dr. Fay. I sat across from her, shook my head gently. Saren Vale is fine. You didn't have to risk your job for me. Her eyes darted to the door, then back to me. They used your picture in 6 different campaign drafts. One even had a mock-up of a Vogue feature, Modern Love Meets Legacy Wealth. She pushed the tablet forward. The emails came next, dozens of them, internal strings. From Callan Dorn's uncle, PR heads, even Varel Dorn chiming in with lines like, her backstory will play beautifully in the Times piece. Callan Dorn's hesitation is emotional, not strategic. I stared at that sentence for a long time. Hesitation. Not love, not doubt. Just strategy. Lucy's voice broke the silence. He cried when he found out about your inheritance, she said softly. Told his father, now we can finally be equals. She looked down. That was the only time I ever heard him say anything remotely genuine. I nodded once, then reached into my purse for my phone. Thank you, Lucy, I said, and meant, this wasn't just a leak, it was clarity. They're going to blame you, she whispered. I smiled gently. Let them. I stepped outside and called Mace. Let's set up the foundation account today, I said. And remove Blaine Estate from all active partnership listings. I don't want their name anywhere near mine. Mace didn't ask questions. She just responded, already done. And Saren Vale, I'm proud of you. That evening, back in my apartment, I poured myself a cup of tea I didn't really want and sat by the window. The city lights blinked in the distance, calm, indifferent. I logged into the wedding portal. At the top of the page was a banner, event canceled due to recent privacy concerns and third-party interference. The Blaine family regrets to announce the indefinite postponement of the Blaine-Faye wedding. Beneath it, a message from Varel Dorn, sanitized, and vague, implying that I had breached confidentiality. I didn't flinch. I clicked reply. Quietly uploaded a zip file, 27 pages of internal emails, drafts, pitch decks, and the cover slide, with my face stamped beneath the words, Asset Repositioning Strategy. Q4, then I closed my laptop. No message, no caption, just the truth. Didn't rush. After uploading the last file, I sat back in my chair, let the silence stretch across my apartment, and watched the spinning icon blink. Then vanish. The packet had been sent. Not just to the legal watchdog group, but to 3 journalists I trusted. One from The Atlantic, one from the Washington Ledger, and the third, an old professor turned columnist who once warned me about families, like the Blaines. Then, with both hands steady, I typed a public statement and pressed publish. I have nothing to gain, but others deserve to know when families play God with reputations and love. No hashtags. No drama, just clarity. It took 23 minutes before I saw the first alert, then 6 more, then hundreds. The emails had gone viral. By the time I refreshed the page, the Blaine documents were trending on X. A TikTok clip showed a young woman summarizing the proposal deck in front of a whiteboard like a college lecture. She circled the words marital merger strategy and underlined my photo. Would you marry someone who called you a diversity asset? She asked. It wasn't just shock, it was outrage, and it wasn't just about me anymore. My phone buzzed constantly. Former colleagues I hadn't heard from in years messaged to say, I'm sorry. One even admitted, I used to think you were overreacting. I didn't know. Of course, the Blaine estate didn't stay silent for long. That night, Callan Dorn released a video statement. He wore a crisp navy blazer, no tie. Standing in front of a fireplace at the family's Hamptons estate, his voice was soft, measured, coached. I never meant to hurt anyone. I believed in love, and I still do. This situation, it's complicated. I ask for privacy as our families navigate this difficult moment. He didn't mention me, not once, not by name. I didn't respond. I didn't need to, because the next wave hit by midnight. Sponsors began pulling their money from the Blaine Foundation. A children's cancer initiative released a firm statement distancing themselves. One of the major fashion brands canceled, a long-standing collaboration with Varel Dorn. By morning, she had stepped down from all her board roles, citing health concerns. And the state senator who'd appeared in the Blaine PR deck? He opened a preliminary investigation into undisclosed lobbying via personal relationships. They hadn't just played God with my life. They'd tried to play politics with it, too. That afternoon, I stayed in the office. Maze brought over a sandwich and a hot tea. She didn't say much, just lit 2 votive candles near the window and sat across from me. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt calm. I watched the soft flicker of candlelight dance across the marble windowsill and finally let my shoulders drop. I looked up at her and said quietly, "It's not revenge, it's exposure. Truth isn't cruel, it's just overdue." She reached out, squeezed my hand once, and nodded. It was just after 8:30 p.m. when I sat down at my desk again. I opened the folder labeled Wedding Guest Lists, Mood Boards, the Registry, Drafts of Vows. I didn't scroll through them. I just right-clicked the folder, Delete. The screen asked, "Are you sure?" I clicked. Yes. Then, almost like muscle memory, I checked my inbox one last time. A message. From Callan Dorn. Sent hours earlier. Blank subject line. Just 5 words. "Did you ever love me?" I stared at it, not because I didn't know the answer. Did, but because it made me realize he still thought this was about him. I clicked block, and just like that, the connection ended. I shut down my screen, picked up my tea, leaned back. I was halfway through a second sip when my laptop pinged again. One new message, from an unfamiliar sender. A small firm based in Washington, D.C. Subject line, "We'd like to fund your foundation fully. When can we talk?" I didn't just walk away with the truth. I walked into something bigger. The inbox pinged again, just after dawn. I hadn't slept much the night before. Too many emotions running quiet under the surface. Not adrenaline, not revenge, just weight. Lifting, the kind that doesn't make a sound when it leaves you. But suddenly, your lungs remember what breathing should feel like. The subject line blinked again. "We'd like to fund your foundation fully. When can we talk?" The sender, a firm I'd heard of. Old money, conservative on paper. But lately, they'd been backing women's advocacy projects. Quietly, but decisively. This wasn't some vague offer. It was a door. And this time, I had the, 3 weeks later, I stood on the steps of a stately brick building just blocks from the Capitol. Frosted windows, polished railings. A plaque on the wall that read more like legacy than business. The elevator smelled like new leather and purpose. They offered everything: full backing, office space, staff, budget, press support, but only if I agreed to be the face of the foundation. Gave them one sentence, one condition. No more branding women as broken or brave. We don't perform our pain. We fund their voices. We don't speak over them. We stand beside them. Silence. Then nods. And that was how the Marine Initiative began, named after the woman who raised me when the rest of the world found me inconvenient. My grandmother, Marin. She used to press wildflower seeds into my palm and whisper, "You don't need to shout to change a place. Just bloom where they never expected you to." Now her name was etched in the glass wall of our entrance. The first campaign? My own story. We called it The Cost of a Signature, a digital docu-series tracing how family contracts, financial, emotional, reputational, shackle women into palatable silence. I didn't flinch. Not when the first article ran. Not when the first billboard went up, across from a Blaine-owned event hall in Atlanta. Not when my photo appeared in the New York Times, beneath the headline, "The Woman Who Refused to Be Bought and Bought." Back her voice. I didn't respond when Reginald Blaine issued his carefully crafted apology on national radio. We deeply regret the private misjudgments that became public. His voice still had that calm banker tone, like a man offering discounts after a PR storm, not remorse. Varel Dorn resigned from her last board seat. Cited medical stress. Callan Dorn vanished. No press, no tweets, no statements, just silence. The, same silence he once used like a blade. I didn't chase any of it. The truth had legs now. It didn't need mine. One evening, the office was quiet. The cleaning crew had gone. My heels clicked softly across the polished wood as I entered my corner room. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Capitol bathed in dusk. I poured myself a small glass of red wine. Let the quiet stretch. Then opened the bottom drawer of the cabinet behind my desk, pulled out a thin leather folder. The original prenup. My name typed in capital letters. Clause after clause spelling out how love had been reduced to terms, to strategy, to someone's fear of my independence. I opened another drawer. Inside, a metal tag. Closed lessons. I slipped the folder in. Shut the drawer. Locked it. Across the room, my computer chimed. A message. From him. Callan Dorn. 5 words. Did you ever love me? I stared at it, and, for the first time, I felt nothing. No anger, no nostalgia, no ache, just a clean, sharp awareness that I'd already answered that question. With every step I took away from him, I hit block, then opened my journal, and wrote something different. A letter. To the girl I used to be. You weren't difficult. You were deliberate. You weren't too much. You were just ahead. They tried to cage your power, because they saw it before you did. But you found it anyway. Later that night, I kicked off my shoes in the doorway of my new apartment. Sparse, warm, mine. I curled onto the sofa with my wine in hand and the city lights in the distance. No voices. No expectations, no papers to sign, only peace. Because some people hand you contracts to control your worth. But real value? It doesn't come with signatures or conditions. It comes the moment you stop asking for permission and start writing your own terms.